culture. So connections are what bring us together. Culture is how we behave. I've got a cautionary tale. It's 1987. I'm 16 years old and it's my last year at Francis Douglas College. I'm unpacking my bags and firing my clothes into drawers, and I'm stoked. For the first time in my life, I've got a room to myself. I've got a desk and a bed, and I've got a door. And I can shut the world out. I can shut out the music. Growing up in Mangamingi, Dad used to listen to Radio New Zealand. Occasionally he had a tape deck and he'd listen to Nana Muscuri. We used to listen to those stories on a Sunday morning. And I arrived at boarding school and these kids with long hair had ghetto blasters and they were listening to the Eagles at full bore. And heavy metalers were banging away to Iron Maiden. And the pretty boys had their little bubble-shaped CD players listening to Genesis, bopping away. And it felt like I was being assaulted. And finally, I was in a room with a door to myself. I was a 7th former, I was king of the jungle, and it was going to be a good year. And then Brother John called us to the common room, and he said that we were role models. The young boys looked up to us. And that unfortunately there weren't enough brothers at school and we were going to have to manage study groups with mixed-aged kids from the rest of the school. And I was gutted. That's the last thing I wanted to do. I had the leadership ambition of a lemming, a sheep, or a tandem trailer. I knew I was going to suck at that. I knew I was not going to get any work done. And I knew I had no choice. And Brother John said that we were responsible, that we were good citizens. But because there weren't enough brothers, some of the teachers from school were going to work in the hostel. And I couldn't believe it. They were going to ask my science or my biology or my maths teacher to come into my home and supervise me after school. It was unbelievable. And the next day at dinner time, I wiped down the table and I balled up the cloth. I lined it up at the basin on the far side of the room. It was recessed into the wall. And I let it go. And it unravelled a bit, but it maintained its trajectory. It went over 2 tables of borders. It struck the wall above the basin. It held for a moment and then dropped perfectly in. Hardly a splash. It was the shot of my life. 3 points. Vincent Ford was Mrs. Plum, my biology teacher. I'd forgotten that she was even there. Go and pick that up. But it went in. Walk across, pick it up, take it back to your table, and then walk it back to that basin. I couldn't believe it. And in my head I swore, except it was in my mouth. And it came out my lips. I didn't just say that. She didn't hear me. But Mrs. Plum's eyes widened and her shoulders squared. And I swore again, but quietly this time, because I knew I was in deep shit. I walked across that dining hall, and I wasn't the kid that swore at teachers. That kid had a moustache and a leather jacket and a bad attitude. I had very little facial hair. I wore a swan dry, and I had a bad habit of saying sorry too often. I walked across, I got the cloth, I wrung it out, I turned and I walked back. And boarders had been throwing cloths across that room for as long as I could remember. And I knew that the 3rd formers, the rejects and the misfits, sat at the table closest to that basin. And they got splashed. And I knew it was wrong. And I knew it was a form of bullying. But I had forgotten about it completely because that's what we did. That was the culture in that school. And the brothers turned a blind eye to it, and I didn't even think of it. I made it to the table, I turned and I walked back and I glanced at Mrs. Plum, and she was still as rigid as Mount Taranaki. I walked back, I put the cloth in the basin, I turned left, I went through the kitchen, I went to my room, and I closed the door. And I waited for Brother John to come and to knock on that door, or to just open it, because I wasn't really sure about door protocol. But I waited for him to tell me that I'd been suspended or I'd been expelled. I waited for my father to come and pick me up, and I knew he would be so disappointed. He'd only dropped me off the night before. But Michael Fleming came through that door. He was in Mrs. Plum's basketball team. And he didn't knock. He came in and he said Mrs. Plum had told her that no student had ever swore at her before. And he told me I needed to go and apologise. So I walked across and I found Mrs. Plum in the courtyard. And I said, I don't know why I said what I said. I am so sorry. I didn't mean it, and it is the last time that will ever happen. And maybe Mrs. Plum knew what it was like to be powerless. She was a female teacher in a boys' school. Maybe she knew what it felt like to have the rug pulled out from under her. Maybe she knew why I swore, because she never told Brother John. My dad never found out. She accepted my apology. I think maybe it was because she knew what it was like to be powerless, but maybe it was because she was coach of the senior basketball team, and that was the best shot of my life. But that's just a cautionary tale on power, because everyone in this room is in a position of power, and we've got great ideas, and you'll come away from this conference with great ideas. But sometimes it pays to remember the people that are powerless. And sometimes if things are foisted upon us and we have no power and no input in it, that might be when we strike back.